Reporting from Arkham Asylum, this is Gotham Rogues. In this video, we take a look at the comic book series Gotham City Sirens. Gotham City Sirens was a comic book series that ran from 2009 to 2011, ending at issue number 26. The first half of the series was primarily written by Paul Dini and penciled by Guillaume March, and the second was primarily written by Peter Calloway and penciled by Andre Guinaldo. It starred a trio of Gotham's most notorious female rogues: Catwoman, Poison Ivy, and Harley Quinn. In this video, I will be talking about the entire series as a whole and not going too in-depth into any of the specific stories. It's a broad review of the Gotham City Sirens title, not any singular storyline. Anyway, at the beginning of the series, we find a somewhat weakened Catwoman who's still recovering from a previous encounter with Hush. Due to her condition, Selina is actually overpowered when she's attacked by a new small-time supervillain called Bone Blaster, who's out to make a rep for himself. Then Poison Ivy suddenly appears and rescues Selina, subduing Bone Blaster. Since the two ladies have a history of some sort of friendship, Pamela invites Selina to come stay with her and Edward Nygma, aka the Riddler, at his apartment. When they arrive, it turns out that Pam has used her pheromones on Eddie, turning him into her slave and taking over his home, and that with the Joker in Arkham, Harley Quinn is also staying there. Catwoman then suggests that the three girls band together and get a place of their own, which they kind of have to anyway, as Bone Blaster returns looking for revenge, awakening the Riddler from his trance. Using her underworld connections, Selina secures a spacious safe house for herself and her two gal pals. The rest of the series focus on the misadventures these three ladies share together, as well as some additional insights into their personal lives. Towards the end of this series, a rift begins to grow between the team, and it ends with the girls splitting up, going their separate ways. If you're a fan of Bat-Rogues, how can the concept of taking three Batman villains and having them shack up together and be roommates not be insanely appealing to you? It's like the setup for a sitcom, but with the Gotham Rogues. The three ladies work perfectly together as well, and their different personalities complement each other really well. Selina is the responsible, no-nonsense hen mother of the group. Harley is the gullible, immature, and innocent airhead, and Ivy is the cold, deadpanned, and unpredictable wild card. Out of the three, Pam is portrayed as the most sinister one and the least loyal. Being half-plant, she's really got her own thing going, and a connection to a completely different world than that of humans. This is something which Selina and Harley will never understand, and nowhere is that more evident than in the story where Ivy comes across a plant-based life form from another planet who wishes to conquer Earth. Instead of fighting him and standing by mankind and her two sisters, Ivy actually helps the plant alien instead. That says a lot about which part of her that's the dominant one, which is something we've seen in plenty other Poison Ivy stories. The idea that she rejects her human side in favor of her plant side. Of course, the other two gals ain't completely loyal either. When the Joker gets into the picture, who do you think Harley chooses? Selina and Ivy over her puddin'? Not likely. She's even willing to kill her friends if Mr. J wishes it. It's fascinating because the Joker aside, Harley is prepared to do just about anything for her friends and would otherwise never betray them. In this series, Joker's portrayed like a drug to Harley, a very dangerous drug that completely changes her personality. When she's with her gal pals, Harley is friendly, cute, and ditzy, but when she rejoins with Mr. J, she becomes a cold psycho who eagerly kills and revels in mayhem and chaos. As for Catwoman, she's got her connection with Batman, something which the other two will never understand. Selina and Bruce have always had a thing going on ever since the early 40s, but at the point when this series came out, that relationship was deeper than ever. During this era, Catwoman was sort of Batman's ally and girlfriend, and in a way almost a part of the superhero community. That's why we don't really see her committing crimes in this series, and why she tries to get Harley and Ivy to lay low and stay out of trouble. But anyway, her love for Bruce is something that she refuses to compromise, and this is shown very effectively when her two pals tries to force the Dark Knight's secret identity out of her. She won't reveal it because because in the end, Batman means more to her than the two of them do. Besides these three ladies, another rogue who made frequent appearances in Gotham City Sirens, at least during the first half of it, was the Riddler. Just like Selina, Eddie wasn't really a villain either, as this series took place during the period when Nigma was reformed and worked as a private detective. The girls would often bump into him, which never really turned out to be good for poor Eddie, as it always got him into some jam of sorts. After all, every sitcom needs that recurring character who the gang exploits and gets into trouble, like Rickety Cricket from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I've said sitcom a couple of times now, and this series is indeed quite humorous, but it isn't just laughs and happy fun times. There's also a lot of serious and dark parts to this comic, especially in the later half. The later half, or to be more specific, starting with issue number 16, when Peter Calloway took over the writing duties, is actually when this series started to go downhill. Calloway just isn't as good of a writer as Paul Dini or the others who worked on the title, like Tony Bedard. He doesn't write the characters as well as Dini and crew did. His jokes aren't as funny as theirs were, and most importantly, he rushes his plots. Although I don't think that is really his fault. I said Gotham City Sirens lasted 26 issues. That's not that many. So why did it get cancelled? Well, it seems that DC wanted it cancelled in order to clear their slates for the upcoming reboot with the New 52 in 2011. This series wasn't one of their biggest, so I assume they just didn't bother with renewing it. Hence, it is to my belief that DC ordered Calloway to bring the comic to an ending as quickly as possible, and that's why it feels so rushed. It's a shame because while he isn't as skilled of a writer as, say, Paul Dini, he did have some really interesting ideas. It was he who started a growing rift between the girls, and the whole thing begins with Harley Quinn deciding to break into Arkham and kill Joker in revenge for all the times he's betrayed and used her. This is a fascinating idea. Harley finally having enough of her sick addiction to the Joker and deciding to kill him herself in order to end it. Calloway is also the one who really hammered down the concept of Mr. J being a drug to Harley that changes her personality. But the problem is, it all happens too fast and comes out of nowhere. She literally just suddenly decides to run out on the group and go kill Joker. There's no real build up to it, which ruins what could have been one of the greatest Harley Quinn stories ever told. Another thing that appears out of the blue is a strong sense of animosity between Selina and Ivy, which is then what truly breaks up the team. They act as if the two's hostility towards one another has been there all along and is now finally coming to a head. But if that's the case, we certainly weren't shown any of it. Sure, during the Dini stories, they had their differences, but there was nothing that really seemed to threaten their friendship. It's not the concept of the gang breaking up that bothers me. That was to be expected. After all, they're rogues, not superheroes, and two of them are even severely disturbed. Their living situation could never last forever, but the ending needed to have a better and longer build-up. If I'm going to single out any specific stories of this series that stands out to me as extra memorable, I'd say the one I already mentioned, where Ivy helps a plant alien conquer Earth. Then there's the one where Gaggy, Joker's old sidekick from the 60s, returns and tries to get revenge on Harley for replacing him. It was awesome to see old Gagsworth again, and he's a character that could actually qualify for a Forgotten Batman Villains video. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do that. There's also the part where the girls hired the Riddler to help clear their names in a frame-up, which of course ends up getting Eddie into a lot of trouble. Then of course all the parts that involve Ivy taking a job at Star Labs are just hilarious. In Cycle of Life and Death, another story where Pam took a job as a scientist, she actually tried to fit in and act as a normal person. But here in Sirens, it's the opposite. She uses her pheromones on her male colleagues to further her career and fires people left and right, all the while acting completely arrogant and ruthless. It's like, well, as if a supervillain got a job. Then we have a Christmas issue that gives us some insight into the three rogues' personal lives. We get to meet Harley's dysfunctional family for the very first time, I think, witness Ivy's failed attempt at a vacation in a South American jungle, and see Selina share a calm and quiet moment with Dick Grayson and Alfred. Bruce wasn't around because in the earlier issues he was still considered to be dead at the hands of Darkseid and had therefore been replaced by Grayson. Due to that, we don't get much Batman, if any, besides Dick Bat in the first half of the series. The artwork is well done throughout the entire title, and while there are several different pencilers on it, they all have a somewhat similar style, thus it never really feels all that inconsistent. If I had to pick a favorite artist of the bunch, I'd say it's Guillaume March, and he did draw most of the Dini pen stories. So, in conclusion, Gotham City Sirens is a great concept that actually turned out to be very good too. That is, until they decided to pull the plug on it. There's a lot of fun stories in the first half, and seeing these three rogues together interacting with each other is enough of a reason to read it, as opposed to featuring huge events where the fate of the entire world is at stake. Most of the stuff we got in Sirens were smaller, character-driven stories, and usually those are the best. If you haven't read this series already, I suggest that you pick up the first volume of 2 that DC recently released. Most of the good parts are in that one, and it includes all of the Dini stuff. Skip the second volume, you will most likely just be disappointed by it. I hope DC makes more of these types of Bat-Rogue-centric comics at some point. How about a male version where Riddler, Two-Face and Penguin shack up together? That would have been something. So, that's Gotham City Sirens, a title with a great first half, but sadly a mediocre second half. Remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.